what type of organizations are coming here in terms of sustainability and how they claim or how they are actually impacting it. So give me like one or two top example that you say, yes, I saw this organization, they're really great in making this impact.
So sadly, where we live in the part of the world that we live is very regulatory driven.
Yeah.
So and Singapore is a leader in Southeast Asia and maybe in Asia. I mean, okay, it's not actually in Asia, because if you go look at China, right? China's an amazing example. What did China do when they had the Olympics in Beijing? They had all this smog from pollution.
Yep.
And so, again, all carbon emission.
Yeah, true.
And they said, we're going to have the whole world visit China. And this was, it might be hard for some of your listeners to understand that when they hosted the 2000 Olympics, I think it was?
China was?
China.
Yeah, 2000, I believe.
It was really the first global level event that China held. Now, 25 years, they're the world's largest economy. They're booming and everything is coming out of China. The AI that's coming out of there is incredible. But at the time, this was China sort of showing the world what it could do.
Right, okay.
They wanted it to be clean. So they passed laws. They started investing heavily for their government buses, their government cars, all of that to be electric because they didn't want the pollution. Right.
Wow.
So when you think about that, they're leading. Now, in terms of companies that are here, a lot of what's happening in Asia is reporting.
Yeah.
People are now reporting that, there's certain standards and frameworks from all over the world. Singapore's got a carbon tax. There's a lot of reporting here. But what I see is I do see incredible innovation coming out of all kinds of all kinds of the world. A company that I know very well, they are able to produce fresh water out of the air.
Okay. Wow.
Sounds like magic, but basically they're able to dehumidify the water that is in the air. And I was speaking to the founder, and he said the water in the atmosphere is 200 times more than the water that we consume on an annual basis.
Wow. So there's a lot of
huge amount. So, and if you think about water, most people don't know this. Less than 1% of the world's water is drinkable. You think we fight wars for oil? Wait till we start running out of water.
Yeah.
Right? We're already seeing it in certain places. The innovation that has taken place in solar panels, that innovation, I think, has happened at a rate faster than even the most optimistic scientists could have hoped 10 years ago. The rate at which the price has come down and the efficiency has gone up, so much so that I was reading that, in Pakistan, where electricity is a huge problem. I mean, my family's from India. I've spent a lot of time there. Blackouts are very, very
common. Yep.
Because of that, and because of the sort of import of these cheap Chinese solar panels, so much of Pakistan is now going off the grid.
Yep.
They're just putting their own solar panels. The same thing is happening in Africa, right? So you're now starting to enable whole parts of the world that were struggling to do basic things. I mean, we take for granted being able to flick a switch and turn a light on. We take for granted fresh water here in Spain.
Yeah, true.
There are only 20 odd countries in the world that there's fresh water in their tap. So, we're really, out of the 200, there's only 10%. When you think about that, that's a really scary statistic.
True, and very true on your solar panel example. That's what we see with AI, right? At the moment, you see that, again, it's massively in the news. You got OpenAI charging you, spending about hundreds and billions of dollars in terms of training models and doing it, whereas the China DeepSeek coming in, doing it at fraction of the cost, right?
Which is basically what China's been doing for the last 30 years, right? They whatever West has done, whatever works, we're going to do it at a tenth of the cost. China is doing incredible things.
Yeah.
China, they have the world's largest solar field.
Wow. Okay.
They have, they've seen the Japanese bullet trains. They definitely copied them, and now they've started exceeding them. I was reading about a train that now does 450 miles an hour. So you're starting to, be able to cover huge amounts of land. A friend of mine said that it takes the same time to travel from Beijing to Shanghai on a train in China as it did for him to get from, not Beijing to Shanghai, but Beijing to like certain other cities that are there, as it takes for him to get from JFK Airport to New Jersey.
Oh, wow. Okay. So basically fraction of the time.
They've launched a satellite where they're trying to beam the sun's energy directly down to Earth. So it's a huge endeavor. Some of this will work. Some of this will not work, but they've got to be trying.
Yeah. And that's the part, right? That's the part again. Yes, touching on China, that's the part. They've been trying, experimenting, yes, replicating or duplicating, whatever you want to term it, but they're doing it, right? So that you have to give it to them. You have to give it to them, and they will become a massive anchor when it comes to the price point. Again, at the end of the day, I do see the carbon sustainability has quite a lot to do with the price point and the energy that, you purchase energy and then you do it. So technically there is a relationship around that. But what are your thoughts on that? The carbon emissions and these stuff which are coming in from China, what are they doing about this?
China may be the most polluting country in the world, but on a per capita basis, I think Singapore is more.
Okay.
The US is significantly more because nobody in China is driving huge SUVs, whereas, the Ford F-150, which is a massive truck,
they're
best vehicle in America for the last 20 years. What is happening in China is, I think they've rather very cleverly looked at America and said, you've spent $10 trillion in the last 20 years to protect your oil infrastructure. Because let's be very clear. You go into Iraq, the reason they went into Iraq was to make sure that oil kept pumping.
Yeah.
Come into the US. China's like, we don't want to do that. So we're just going to be the world's leader in renewables. We're going to be the world's leader in solar panels. We're just going to make the best solar panels, and the energy that we get from that is free.
Yeah.
They are nothing if not pragmatic.
Say the least, this so-called duplicating, copying is working in their advantage, because they're not just duplicating, they're basically duplicating with the intelligence and the do's and don'ts that comes with it.
If I ask you what you think if I talk about a Japanese car, you're probably going to tell me quite affordable, very reliable.
Yeah.
Right?
Those are the two
things that come into a Japanese car. If you go to the 70s, a Japanese car was not reliable.
Yeah.
It was cheap, and it would break down. It was, not well made, not well regarded at all.
Mm-hmm.
But the Japanese, as the Japanese do, maybe better than any other culture on this planet, they learned, they iterated, they focused, they learned, they iterated, they focused, they got better, they got better, they got better. It's exactly what's happening with China right now. 20 years ago, with the Cherry QQ and some of these other cars, nobody would be caught dead driving one of them. They were the cheapest cars on the road. They looked like they were made from flimsy plastic, like you could die.
Yeah.
Now, BYD taking over the world, right? And you look at them, they said, okay, everybody likes what a Tesla looks like. Great, let's make one that looks like a Tesla.
We do have one now.
They do have one that looks like a Tesla.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right? And I've had to do a double take a couple of times with it.
And it works. It worked.
But you see that, and it wouldn't surprise me if in another 10 years, like Chinese cars, China has already overtaken Germany in terms of the world's largest car exporter.
Yes.
Right? So they're already there. And America does. America said, oh, we want to ban Chinese cars. Right. So what did China do? They went out and bought a bunch of brands.
Yes.
They went and bought Volvo. They went and bought, I think it's Rover.
MG as well.
MG is the one I was thinking.
Yeah.
They went and bought a bunch of brands that everybody associates with being Swedish. Nope, it's China.
Yeah.
And the quality's gone up. The price has come down. But hey, no, it's a Swedish car. We're buying a Swedish car.
Yeah. And I think that's what they've done very brilliantly, especially when MG came into Singapore or any other part of the world. Everybody's saying, oh, it's basically a British brand, but manufactured in China, right? We should give it a shot.
Yeah.
And it worked. And then
I think that's what we're seeing now. China has more STEM PhD graduates and students than probably the entire Western world combined.
There you go. Right.
They are just pushing out people in science, technology, and engineering.
Yeah.
Right? They're just making people who know how to make things.
Yeah.
You know, the incredible thing, I've always admired people that are engineers because of how they are able to look at a particular problem and their mind is trained to find solutions.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, China's a huge polluter, but they're trying to do something about it. I think that they've done more for renewable energy than probably any other country on the planet. And don't get me wrong, I'm not a fan of their system of government.
Yeah. Okay.
But something that is incredible with with the system of government that they have is that when they choose to go down a path, they can commit to that path for 20, 30 years. And everybody has to get on board because you really have no choice.
Yeah. Or so everybody gets on board.
Everybody gets on board.
Somehow. Yeah.
Find a way.
Yeah.
So that, if they set their mind to saying that we want to be, and by the way, China has set net zero goals. They're the only country in the world that's pulling them forward because they're doing it. They're going ahead of time. Yep. As opposed to the rest of the world, which is saying, I know what we said in 2030, but really it's going to be 2040 and likely to be 2050, right? That's not what China's doing.
Right. So if I take a moment to understand from you, with increased adoption of AI in the tech world, let's just focus on China for a minute. Increased adoption of AI with already, as you said, we got PhDs lined up, a lot of science students lined up, a lot of tech students lined up, engineering students lined up. Now they have this tool in the hand with DeepSeek or similar models, which are cheaper, accessible to build platforms altogether. If I have to ask you the three major categories where this will impact in China perspective, the carbon emission or sustainability angle.
It's impossible to say because it will all depend on where that energy and that time is spent, right? So if China wants to develop the next level of aircraft carrier, they'll be able to use DeepSeek to come up with the best kind of materials and, the draft of the aircraft carrier and all of that. They'll be able to do whatever they want. So it really depends on where they want to spend that and how they want to do it. I think what China understands, renewable energy is free once you set up the hardware. Yes, there's maintenance. Yes, there's all of this. But right now, the way that it's going, it is cheaper to deploy a solar panel farm than it is to just maintain the existence of a coal mine, for example. So the idea that even just to maintain status quo, it's cheaper to put in solar. And they know, China, it's not a growing population, but it's a huge population.
Yep.
Right? And the rural to urban movement is continuing in a massive way. There are cities in China that you and I have never heard of that have populations in excess of 20, 25 million people. And that number is getting more. And look, as I said, my family's from India. India has 5 cities, I think.
Broadly?
With just 5 cities with more than 10 million people.
Yeah, okay. That was, yes.
In China, there's like 25 or 30 cities that have more than 10 million people in them. So that rural to urban switch is going to happen, and that means it's going to require a lot of energy.
Yes.
So that I think where does AI come into all of this? Again, it's all about what the users want, right? You're going to see content being generated by AI, so people are going to have to become very careful. I'm sure that it's going to be common practice in 20 years for families to have some kind of a passcode or passphrase that they say to each other in order to make sure that they are actually speaking to a member of their family and not just an AI that sounds like a member of their family and telling them they're in help or they need money or something like that.
Yeah, well, that is already happening. And what we have seen in the AIQURIS world is a lot of enterprise level adoption on AI stops at POCs. They do POCs and everything, and the confidence get decreased on putting the AI into production. And this is very real. Yes, in the sandbox or a closed environment, it works. How about when we put it into the real production, right? So 72% of the use cases this is Gartner's prediction came in, are actually sitting in POCs. They're not getting into production.
I think that number is similar for all tech, not just AI. You know, having been in tech sales for a very long time, I know that generally if you're there in a large corporate, you're not actually there to make the business better. You're there to build a career.
If you're working, it's a job,
It's a job in large corporate, right? You want to make sure that you climb this corporate ladder. You want to make sure that you're in the right places, taking the right decisions, in the right meeting rooms, managing up, right? So what they do, and what I've noticed that they do incredibly well at large corporations, is they mitigate against risk.
Correct. Yes.
So remember we were talking about, you know, the Cold War and the probability of 100% to 10%.
Yeah.
So for most people in a corporate, even if there's a 5% chance that it's going to go badly and that could reflect badly on them and therefore derail their career, they're not going to take it because they're never going to get fired for saying no. Instead, they're going to say, hey, look at me. I'm so innovative. I've gone and looked at all of these different tools, but I don't think they're right for us.
Save myself.
Yeah.
That's why we have the startups, right? Again, you're very rightly nugged into the sustainability angle of it by saying what the startups can change, because they don't have a liability of getting promotions. They don't have that, pressure coming to them by saying, if I say no, something will go wrong. If I say yes, something might go well.
But it's the same problem in sustainability. It's the same problem of if you work with a startup, and I tell this to my clients all the time, they're so passionate, they're so driven by what they do. And I ask them, what do you think you're selling when you go to a company? And they'll say, I'm selling my product, I'm selling my tool, I'm selling my software, whatever, fill in the blank. I'm like, no, you're selling stability. You're selling security.
Yeah.
You're selling the fact that this guy that's sitting across the table from you has to believe that you're going to be there in 10 years, 15 years. Because if they don't believe that, and if they think there's a chance you might be, and everybody has been fed these stories of 90% of startups fail within the first year, 95% of the ones that last fail within the first 5 years, they will not buy you.
Yeah.
It is easy to buy Google. It is easy to buy Meta because you believe that these companies are going to be around for the next 10 years.
But because organizations are still buying them, knowing that these companies, the bigger conglomerates, are probably the biggest culprit to the carbon and sustainability.
The question goes back to what we said about 1.5 degrees. Most people don't think about sustainability as much as they should. And the fact that they don't think about it means it's not something that even factors into their thought process. You have chief sustainability officers that tell me their job is to do reporting.
Okay, that we have done this.
Yeah, that's it.
So we've done this.
I've got to compile my ESG report, just like I have to compile my financial report. That's it. I'm not trying to push any initiatives. I'm not trying to do anything because actually I want to get promoted, or I want to go somewhere else, or I want to go to a bigger division, or I want to run something else. It's not that.
But now it's choice, right? I can always flip around by saying this has kind of become a compliance topic.
It is a compliance job now. And if you look at most CSOs, their background is not science. It's not sustainability. It's not environmental systems.
Yeah.
It's not anything that you would expect a chief sustainability officer. If you had a chief finance officer that had no background in accounting, you would think that person was crazy. But that's the case in many companies and many businesses with CSOs and with CFOs.
Are you saying you're seeing a lot of CSOs are not coming from that background?
CSOs come from comms background, from marketing background.
Okay.
And increasingly now from finance background.
Okay.
That's also because it's a relatively new title. The title didn't exist 10 years ago. And so to say as someone that, hey, I want to have, I see some of these job roles that want, 15 years of experience. I'm like, there's nobody that has 15 years of experience in this.
Was sustainability a topic before 15 years ago?
I mean, it existed. People were doing it. But to ask for somebody to have high level 15 years of experience, especially in Asia, that doesn't exist. Really. And so, that chief sustainability officer, where you think their role
Yeah.
be to push initiatives through a business. For some it is. There are some that are out there and they're doing an incredibly amazing job and they're working really hard in very difficult circumstances.
Yeah.
Because they're not getting buy-in from their boss. They're not getting buy-in from their peers. They're trying to push through and they're really trying to do the best that they can. But for a lot of people, it's just a job. And it's a job they're going to rotate through in 2 years, or they might go somewhere else. They might do something else. They might be moved on to somewhere else in the company. So like everything.
To get it a bit of a summary around there, right? What is like one thing that you will tell that if this happens with the help of AI, the world will be a different place? What would that be?
I had a fleeting thought, and I don't know if I should share it because, at the end, you're trying to be optimistic.
It's all right.
If you would have AI simulations map out and model what happens to your city, your home, as a temperature increases 1 degree,
2 degree,
3 degrees.
Wow.
And show people that you think this is going to happen to somebody else somewhere else. But as these things change, your home's going to be flooded, your home's going to be burnt down, your home's going to be something. I don't think anybody living in Los Angeles thought, especially in the part of Los Angeles that it happened in,
that this will happen.
that it would happen to them.
Yeah.
I don't think any of them a year ago, 2 years ago, thought that this would have happened to them.
Correct. Yes.
And so I think that if AI is able to do that modeling in an effective way to make people wake up and realize that something is going to change, and whether they like it or not, that change is coming. And what it's really going to take is a massive rethink of finance and a massive rethink of government and politics. I think that would be incredible.
No, absolutely. And so right and so true that, and I wanted to highlight your earlier point that you mentioned earlier in the podcast we were doing is how everything is so synced that we don't really see the value of one thing connected to the other, right? To your point, if we can see that simulation, if you're doing this and if you change the degree of temperature as simple as this, and you can keep seeing what will happen and why the degree temperature change is affecting this thing.
It matters to you. We are where we are because we are inherently selfish beings. No,
Right, but yeah.
I mean, they did a horrible experiment. I don't know who approved this with monkeys. I don't know if you heard about this. What they did is they put mothers with babies in a cage and then heated the floor.
Wow, okay.
What is the first thing that the mother does? The mother picks up the baby, right? Of course.
And she's there, but she's there, right?
And then feels the heat. But when the heat becomes too much, the mother stands on the baby.
Oh.
Because at our core nature,
we want to save ourselves.
To save yourself. You can make another baby, you can't make another.
Yeah, well.
If you die, that baby's dying next. As I said, I don't know who approved this experiment, but it just shows you that human nature, we are built for survival.
Yeah.
And maybe what we have not realized is just how much and how close we are getting to needing to survive.
No, that's just so true. And I agree. And it resonates pretty well when you gave that example, saying that's so true. And yes, on the pollution and COVID example, we can say people was able to see it. A mass majority were able to see it. But whereas it comes to sustainability, people are not able to see it. But to your point, when you see it, you can't unsee it. And that's where you will do something about it. So, and AI definitely has a way not only to safeguard things or not only to really make it efficient, but also to produce a visibility of how people can see the impact. Not for today, but tomorrow. I think that is very important, right?
And look, I just want to tell people something that, just to make clear, every single job on the planet, yours included, can be a climate job. It just means that you have to be making certain choices when you're on the job, right? That maybe lean a little bit towards being a bit more sustainable. As someone at a conference I was at recently made a very good analogy. He said that if you go and sit an exam and you get 10%, you don't give up. You might go back and get 30%. You might go back and get 40%. And so the question is, you don't have to be getting 100% right. Nobody's getting 100% right. Even Greta Thunberg is probably not getting 100% right.
Yeah.
But if you move from 0 to 10, if you move from 0 to 20, That's a huge shift. And if you have
Progress.
7 billion people, or forget 7 billion, because, most of the people in India and most of the people in Africa, they
Don't even
live the most carbon neutral life out of anybody.
Yeah.
If those of us that are fortunate enough to be able to listen to this on some kind of phone, so obviously you're already in the top 20, 30 percentile of humanity. If those people just say, okay, what can I do today to be a little bit? What can I do in my job to be a little bit more? It has a huge impact.
Yep, basically. That's good. Thank you very much on that. Thanks, Al, for coming in on the show. Thank you very much and appreciate your thoughts. And I'm sure the viewers will get a lot of value out of that.
Thanks so much, Ankit. It was great to be here and it was a great conversation.
Thank you very much. Great.